Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We're happy to continue bringing the park to you through our virtual programming as well as in-person tours. We thank you for being a continued supporter of our weekly walk series. What started as 15-minute and turned into 30-minute virtual tours through various areas of the park throughout all seasons, discussing all types of themes, history, and ecology. Thank you again for joining us today on our weekly walk titled Winter Holidays in Central Park with me, Ryan, on December 13th, 2023. As we take a weekly walk today, we're going to be exploring through the park for about 30 minutes as we see photos that were taken over the past few days here in Central Park. Now, we still have about 8 days until we officially enter into the winter season, but even though we're a little early, we can still get a jump start on showing you some of our favorite winter areas in Central Park. We'll visit some landscapes we've surely visited before, but hopefully we'll tell you a little bit about some information relating to them that you might not know. We'll certainly see a few interesting areas as we begin our walk. So without further ado, thank you again for joining us. And as we explore the park, feel free to utilize Zoom to ask questions using the Q&A feature. You're welcome to say hello using the chat function, and I do encourage you to vote in the polls that'll launch throughout today's tour. Once I've gotten most of those votes in, I'll share the results and we'll see what everybody's thinking. Now, without any further ado, let's jump into our tour today. Just one quick reminder, again, thank you for supporting our mission to keep the park clean and green. We really value having you here and having your support in our mission to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being for all. Even though it's a little early or late into the fall season, we can already experience some of the signs of winter approaching. A lot of the deciduous trees have lost their leaves, and we're starting to get that cold, crisp temperature in the air. So bundle up for this weekly walk as we start to enter the park over near 79th Street, right along 5th Avenue. As we do enter into the park, we can see most of the trees are pretty bare, but of course, we can still see a lot of beauty if we keep our eyes open. As we do enter the park, we can also notice some of the signs, like the one we see pictured just over here on the left. I know a lot of people are seasoned Central Park visitors, but if you're visiting the park for one of your first times, or maybe you've been here before but still get turned around, feel free to scan one of those signs and set up an itinerary. You can get self-guided tours, recommended routes, and it'll make your travel to the park a little bit easier. As we continue into the park right now, we'll keep walking and we'll start walking by the Cedar Hill area, noticing some of these meadows, which are pretty empty. And the reason these are empty right now is because this is one of several lawns that are currently closed. Now you'll notice it's closed for the season. And again, we mentioned that fall has about 8 days left, but we're about to enter a new season. And in winter, we do often see these fences being removed to allow for a very fun activity we're going to check out in just a moment. If you do want to know what lawns are open, though, you can scan the QR codes on these signs and it'll tell you about available lawns nearby. Just in case you make your way to the park and the favorite lawn is closed, you can certainly can find some new lawns nearby. As we travel a little bit further up the path, we can start to see some of these beautiful evergreen trees. What we're seeing here is the beginning of Cedar Hill. And although we see a lot of evergreen trees in view, these are actually not cedars, but rather spruce trees. Spruce trees actually being a type of pine tree within the pine family. Cedar Hill gets its name from some cedars that are on the crest of the hill. But on the very bottom, we can enjoy some of these towering Norway spruce trees. We'll actually check out a Norway spruce a little bit later on in our tour today. But of course, we have to stop by and enjoy our favorite type of coniferous trees to see during the winter seasons. Coniferous trees being needle or scaly leaves, rather than the broad leaves that we see that are typically wide and flat. Of course, extending that wintry feeling as we make our way through the park. And as we travel along this area, we can find many of these trees have plaques giving us the common and scientific name, making our identification a little bit easier. As we walk down this path, now headed towards the south, we can notice a lot of fences are set up over here. As I mentioned, these fences will eventually be taken down. The fences, of course, are just keeping the lawn in a restful condition until we can open it up for a favorite feature that a lot of people, of course, come here for, sledding. Now, the act of sledding has existed in many different forms for centuries over. but its popularity in New York in particular would certainly rise in the 19th century. We do see during this time a lot of different types of sleds being created, a lot of posters, as they would call, or more of a kind of a racing style sled. We start to see this becoming a really prominent way to enjoy New York City's harsh and cold winters that provided a lot of snow. And publications such as the St. Louis Globe would report in January 16th of 1886 that crowds of coasters were forming at the northwestern gate of Lafayette Park. That's a park that's located near Morningside Park, which is near Central Park's northern end. Sledding were, of course, some favorite activities for many people to do, but sledding also was really affected by income. We do see in the 1880s the production of flexible flyers and various other style sleds becoming popular. However, much like other winter-based activities, it was somewhat kind of seclusive in ways, and it didn't really represent the labor and wealth divisions that existed in New York City among society. You had to, of course, be able to afford one of these sleds to really make your way down, and also be able to afford warmer winter clothing that could suffice you out in these cold, harsh winter seasons. Although it initially started by excluding a lot of people, by the 20th century, more affordable, flexible flyers and knockoffs would become available that would allow a lot of people to enjoy this activity. And today, we can see this activity being very, very much accessible, thanks to a lot of the parks throughout New York City, but also thanks to the ingenuity and creativeness of a lot of New Yorkers and visitors that can find a way to sled using just about anything. This photo comes from a New York Times article that actually showcases some of the many interesting types of sleds people might use during this winter season. Certainly a fun activity, and I encourage you to come back to Cedar Hill to experience this for yourself. Actually, on this little subject, I'd like to start by launching a little poll that we can have today. If I can find my polls on here. So the first poll I'd like to launch is sled of choice. Now, what would be your preferred style of sled? We can see generally about 5 types of sleds. If you go online, you might be able to find these 5 categories of sleds. Runner sleds are sleds that have kind of a foot pedal and allow you to change direction. Toboggans, kind of big wood plank that you're just along for the ride. Disc sleds, maybe like those tops of like garbage cans as they started out, but became more official plastic domes. Tubes, which were my personal favorite growing up, inflatable tubes. And then backcountry sleds are not really a kind of sled you would use for maybe traditional sledding. That could actually include everything from the ski rescue sleds they use to even like snowmobiles. So we'll see who decides to pick that one, but I'll give everybody a quick moment to vote in this, and we'll continue our walk traveling a little bit further on. As we make our way through the park today, we're going to head down south now, and we can notice one other thing in this area, some hay bales. If you visited us during the Halloween pumpkin flotilla at the Harlem Mere, these hay bales might be familiar. They were used for the pumpkin patch. And like many things in the park, we do, of course, recycle whatever we can, utilizing the hay from that earlier October program to keep sledders safe over here. Hay bales will be lined up in front of lampposts, trees, or anything hard that you could come crashing into as you make your way from the top of Cedar Hill down onto this lower meadow. As we make our way around Cedar Hill, we can enjoy not only some of the cedar trees that we're starting to see in the background, but also some of the deciduous trees that are still holding on to their leaves, even ones that might not seem deciduous to us. A quick reminder, evergreen trees keep their leaves year long. Deciduous trees lose them in the winter. And sometimes we tend to associate coniferous or needle leaf having trees with always being evergreen, but that's not always the case. As we can see here with the bald cypress, a coniferous leafed tree that actually is deciduous and loses those leaves during the winter season, but gives us a nice rusty orange color before it leaves. We can enjoy the blankets along this area that are keeping some food nice and dry for the squirrels that are roaming around. As we start to make our way now a little bit more south, we can enjoy some of the other beauty we pass along, such as Glade Arch. And as we pass through Glade Arch, I'll launch that poll that we just had out there. And it looks like a lot of people's favorite type of sled is going to be one that you can steer. A lot of the flexible flyers that started coming out, really especially towards the 20th century, starting to incorporate different materials and the ability to turn and maneuver the sled. So certainly became very popular. And as those new sleds were created and became more affordable, knockoffs included, we start to see that activity really becoming widespread. As we continue through Glade Arch, we're going to walk a little bit more south, enjoying the light that we can bask in on the southern end. And we're going to make our way a little bit further down now as we head over to the Alice in Wonderland statue. But we're actually not here to see the Alice in Wonderland statue. We're here to enjoy some of the beautiful remaining foliage that we can see on the shrubs that exist around here. Not exactly sure what type of shrub this is, but I love the fiery color that we're getting, keeping us nice and warm as we make our way through the park. As we come over here to Alice in Wonderland, we can see what we're walking to, not the statue, but rather something that exists just through the statue. Just on the southern side, we can see what we've made our way over to. We're coming over to what right now kind of looks like a big muddy pit because the water has been drained out, but it's none other than conservatory water, or sometimes referred to as Conservatory Lake. Gets the name conservatory for a planned conservatory that was supposed to be here. You might be wondering, what's the difference between a conservatory and a greenhouse? They're both very similar, but a greenhouse typically has much hotter temperatures inside that helps to encourage plant growth, while a conservatory is more like an exhibition hall that would keep plants that were typically growing in a warmer climate or temperate section safe during the harsh winters we'd experience here in New York. So we never see that conservatory being created, but we do see this reflecting pool being designed. A reflecting pool that, of course, would become famous for its use for model boats. However, we do see in the winter this conservatory lake, as it's sometimes referred, being used for a few different types of activities. Walking around the curved edges, we can enjoy the more formal aspect of it. But as we make our way to the about midwestern portion of it, or mideastern portion of it, we can notice some steps that lead down. These steps were here not to drop your boat in the water, but rather to help you walk down into the frozen lake. Because during the winter months, we do see conservatory water becoming really like a third ice skating rink within Central Park. We do see ice skating occurring here pretty early on. As long as cold enough temperatures would provide 6 inches of ice or more, this would be opened up. And we see many people choosing this smaller and quaint rink to learn their ice skating skills before maybe making their way out to the lake. We also see this supporting a lot of fun winter-based activities like the Silver Skates Derby. The Silver Skates Derby, sometimes just called New York Silver Skates, was an amateur speed skating tournament that was organized by the New York Daily News. It was part of a number of similarly named types of events that were happening all over the United States. The event's name being inspired by a fictional speed skating contest entered by the hero of Mary Mapes Dodge's young adult novel, Hans Brinker, or The Silver Skates, which was published back in 1865. The popularity of it did lead to a number of these different silver skate named events occurring throughout the United States, but a really interesting one happening here in Central Park. We do see the event first being held in 1922, actually at a different area over at Lewis Owen Stadium. That's a stadium that was created over on the campus of the City College of New York. It doesn't exist anymore because it was demolished in the 1970s, but initially for the first couple of years it would be held there until moving into Central Park in 1926. It would remain in Central Park from 1926 until about 1934, during which time it would go to MSG for the remainder of the series operation. But for several years here in Central Park, thousands and thousands of visitors would cram around the Pilgrim Hill area and Conservatory Water to watch these incredible speed skating events. We do see the one here coming from 1928. And of course, a lot of interesting views that we can see as the conservatory water rarely freezes over anymore. So rarely do we see anyone skating out here, let alone much of a crowd coming to spectate. But a really interesting blast from the past. And if you do check the chat, my colleague Carla will be on the back end answering questions, and she'll drop in a link that can tell you a little bit more about the Silver Skates competitions that were held in New York. As we make our way back into present day reality, we can start to walk east, or rather west, away from Conservatory Water, or Conservatory Lake as it was known, and we can make our way past the Pilgrim Hill area, which is currently closed. And why exactly is that closed? Well, unfortunately, this lawn did recently receive restoration in 2022, but it did undergo a lot of significant damage. Unfortunately, a lot of dog-related damage. And while I'm a stark advocate for anything dog, it is also important to remember to be a responsible pet owner and to make sure dogs aren't digging holes. Unfortunately, due to a lot of dog-related damage, this lawn has to be closed and restored again. It's just important to remember that many people use the park for many different reasons. And during the summer months, this lawn might seem like it's only used for dogs, but during the winter, it becomes a really important hub for a lot of children and families that come out to the park to sled. So we certainly don't want to see anybody tripping in a pit and hurting themselves. So we do hope this lawn will be restored and ready for the winter sledding season. As we make our way a little bit towards the west now, we can look over Pilgrim Hill, letting it rest up and heal, hopefully to be open in the next coming months after we get some snow for people to go sledding. As we make our way now to the west, we're going to get away from the activity of sledding and check out some other types of winter activities that people could do in the park. But before we do, let's take a little break to go through Trefoil Arch and head up to one of my favorite little evergreen collections in the park. As we walk up this path to the left, we can already see a beautiful collection of various types of evergreen shrubs and trees. Walking up the path, we're delighted to find quite a few rustic benches that give us an opportunity to maybe rest to catch our breath because it is a steep hill, or just to enjoy some of the beauty of this area. Covering us up, it really makes us feel like we're in the middle of a dense woodland. But as we walk further up, we can enjoy some of the various styles and shades of greens we see here, coming from so many different species of trees. Looking around here, we can see cedar trees, this being a Japanese red cedar or a shugi. Really fun little tree to see around here and one of my favorite in the park. Beyond that, we can see hemlock trees. Hemlocks can actually be identified by on the bottom of these little leaves, there's two white stripes. You can also see various types of evergreen shrubs here, maybe like the lesser familiar Andromeda. Andromeda produces some beautiful flowers that you can see kind of starting to form here. I do believe they come towards the late winter, early spring. So a beautiful plant to see while there's still snow on the ground. We can also find some more familiar ones. Trees like, or rather shrubs like rhododendron, which are part of the azalea family. These types of rhododendron are actually evergreen shrubs that do keep these nice, long, waxy leaves year long. This is an example of a broadleaf evergreen shrub as well. But we can also note one interesting thing. You notice how some of these are kind of more oval in shape and a little bit more symmetrical. You'll notice this one in the center of the picture is kind of a little curled. And as we start to get colder into a colder weather, we can actually notice a trait of rhododendrons as they kind of roll up a little bit. Rolling up will help to actually keep the tree a little bit more safer and condensed during the winter time. It is actually an adaptation of the tree that'll help to reduce the freezing of it. And kind of reducing the surface area, it reduces the ability for maybe moisture to evaporate. And of course, during the cold seasons, that can lead to freezing and damaging in the plant. So we do see some fun little adaptations in some of these winter plants. And as we make our way to the top of the hill, we again just feel immersed in a lot of different shades of green. One of my favorite sections to visit is up here, and I do encourage stopping by if you have the opportunity. As we make our way just actually a little bit now down this path, we can find one very interesting feature that sits just along the back end. Looking to the very far end of the path, we walk a little bit further, we can find a tree that we noticed before. This was a tree that we noticed on the bottom of Cedar Hill, but a tree that is actually not a cedar. It is a spruce tree, a Norway spruce tree. Norway spruces, if you may have guessed, are non-native. They are from Norway, and they do pretty well over here, which is one of the reasons they're planted. Typically a lot better at dealing with city pollution and industrialization compared to the maybe more native blue spruce. As we come a little bit closer to this tree, we can enjoy the beauty of it. And we can also revel in the fact that this is really New York City's most famous species of holiday tree. The reason being is because if you've ever seen the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, you have most likely seen a Norway spruce. The tradition for the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree began back in 1931 when Italian-American construction workers constructing Rockefeller Center pooled together some of their money to buy a 20-foot balsam fir, which is pictured here. The tree would be decorated with garland and decorations made from the construction workers' families, very humble decorations that we see being put up here, but ultimately leading to a tradition that would become official 3 years later in 1934. The photo here is showing that first tree, and it's actually featuring a lot of these workers on Christmas Eve as they show up to receive their pay. But a really interesting tradition that began very humbly and, of course, has expanded over the years. Most of the time, about 3/4 of the time since the tradition began, Norway spruce trees have typically been used. There have been other species used, but it has been consecutively a Norway spruce since about 1978. So again, if you visited that Rockefeller tree between 1978 and this year, you have seen a Norway spruce tree, but still plenty that we can find in the park. And these trees, of course, providing a lot of beauty. Rarely can you ever get up that close to the Rockefeller Christmas tree. So it's really nice to see some of these towering giants still growing here in Central Park. As we make our way a little bit over towards the west, we're coming to the heart of the park. The heart of the park being a very familiar landscape to many of us, none other than Bethesda Terrace. Walking our way down the side path of the terrace, we can see that the Angel of the Waters is without waters, as many of these fountains, like conservatory water and other bodies of water that are more human-made or more formal in design, do get drained to allow for preservation of either the architecture like the statue, the stonework, or just general cleaning out of leaves, mud, and other debris and sediment that may have formed over the year. Of course, the Angel of the Water will not have water returning to it until we reach the springtime, but we will see the conservatory water filled back up to allow for ice skating if 6 inches of ice or more forms on there. And speaking of ice skating, we're right nearby the original ice skating rink in the park, none other than the lake, the first feature constructed in the park. And we can tell that the park was really meant to create a wonderful recreational space during the winter months. We know that because the lake on a lot of early parks designs was actually titled the Skating Pond. So we do see this opening in December of 1858 to allow for people to come here and go ice skating, engaging with a brand new and fun activity that was certainly really drawing huge crowds here. We actually would see an estimated about during the peak of ice skating in the late 19th century, early 20th century, upwards of 30,000 people coming to ice skate to the park each day, and upwards of 75,000 just generally visiting the park during the colder winter months. So we actually see visitation being very heavy during the winter, and ice skating was one of those reasons. As the popularity grew, we even see the hours of the park being extended so people could come up and go ice skating at night. This little Currier and Ives photo illustrates what a nice, maybe weekday or weekend night in the park might have looked like. Having a lot of people stopping by after work. I see if I was in this photo, I'd be right here in the middle, the person that has fallen over on their stomach because I can't ice skate too well. But we would see plenty of people stopping by to utilize the most famous skating water body in the park, the skating pond that we know today as the lake. Unfortunately, like sledding, we do see ice skating really kind of showing some of the class divisions that would exist in New York City. You again had to be able to afford ice skates, and you had to be able to afford the proper winter wear. Not to mention that most people, part of the working class, were working 6-day work weeks and 10-hour workdays. Do you think you'd have the energy to come up to the park after a 10-hour workday, walking a few miles to get here to go ice skating? Might not, at least I probably wouldn't. But of course, we do eventually see by the 20th century different types of skating brands becoming popular and helping to make the activity of skating a little bit more affordable. We do see, unfortunately, though, by about the 1940s to 50s, a lot of warming temperatures leading to, of course, regular closures occurring on the park's water bodies. By the 1940s, regular closures for the ice skating water bodies were common. And by the following decade in the 1950s, we start to see a lot of these water bodies being closed off and banned for public ice skating, eventually leading to the creation of Woolman Rink and later Lasker Rink, which are the two primary ice skating facilities in Central Park today. As we make our way back to present day time, we can take a little moment to enjoy Bethesda Terrace in this area as we exit. Making our way up, we can see how even in a formal section of Central Park, nature is still going to reign supreme, as all of these beautiful New Brunswick sandstone carvings feature a lot of different floral motifs and different seasonal representations. If you go from the east to the west, you will find spring and summer. And then as we come to our current photo in view, we can find the inner west, which is going to be fall, as well as the outer west, which will be winter. As we come over to the winter side, we can make our way along this railing, which features pine cones, thorns, and exposed branches. And we'll notice a lot of natural elements here, except for one. So we pass our way up the stair railing. We can notice one carving that is coming as a human constructed object. They are ice skates, more of an original style of ice skates. We do just see a blade with a strap or harness that would kind of just wrap around your boot. Looking a little something like this. This is one of the earlier styles of ice skates that was developed between about 1860 to 1880. That little spike on there certainly is concerning for me. But you can see just stepping your boot on top and then using some of the straps, probably leather, which you can see a little bit on the right, definitely have deteriorated since this is well over 100 years old. But really showing some of the early styles of skates, like the ones we can find pictured on Bethesda Terrace. As we make our way a little further up, we can enjoy one other item here, the beautiful winter season carving that we see. This winter carving features plants and animals found in the park during those seasons. And we can find many of these birds, probably depicting some of John James Audubon's Birds of America. John James Audubon being a naturalist and painter, he did create a series or collection of the Birds of America books. These would feature not only beautiful text, or not only great text, but also beautiful illustrations. And many of these carvings of birds are more than likely based on John James Audubon's 19th century works, which were created between 1827 and 1838. As we make our way a little south from here, we are going to be traveling just a bit down the mall. And as we make our way down the mall, we can check out those beautiful elm trees. But we actually didn't come here to check out trees today. We came here to make our way back off to the east side of the park, to head through a little archway to check out probably everybody's favorite dog here in the park. Walking through Willowdale Arch, we can find why many pedicabs and horse-drawn carriages stop on the top of this arch. They stop up there, of course, to check out none other than the goodest boy in Central Park, Balto. Balto is a dog that, to many of us, probably doesn't need an introduction. He was part of an incredible Great Sarum race of 1925. During this period of time in February of 1925, there was a diphtheria outbreak that occurred in a remote part of Nome, Alaska, causing hundreds of people to fall sick and needing an anti-serum to, of course, make them healthy again. We unfortunately see the harsh Alaskan winter preventing any plane from reaching a point nearby there, leading to an interesting and creative solution being devised. A sled race to deliver this anti-serum, utilizing 20 sled dog teams, over 200 dogs, and going over 674 miles through Arctic blizzard-like conditions, whiteouts, huge mountain elevations, and of course, dangerous ice passages. We see this team traveling a tremendous distance to eventually reach Nome, Alaska, and save hundreds of people. This was a race that was typically estimated to take 2 weeks. The several teams completed it in just 5 days. Their accomplishments were certainly very important, and we see Balto being commemorated with a statue with December 17th of 1925. So we're just a couple days away from Balto's statue dedication. Balto being the only figure to have a statue who was actually there during the unveiling of that statue. The reason Balto got his statue so quickly is because of the popularity that existed around really the story. Back during this time, most of North America or the United States' populations lived in cities and urban areas. And this was a time of mass consumerism as radio broadcasting was popular. This story being broadcast the entire time really was framed as man's best friend versus nature. And it really captured the hearts of a lot of people, especially since the story really centered around more of American values that were popular during the time. However, while Balto was, of course, the lead sled dog that would eventually arrive in Nome, Alaska in front, he would be skyrocketed into fame, and it would unfortunately somewhat exclude some of the other stars in this journey. For one, we can see Togo pictured here. Togo was part of Leonard Sapala's team. Although he doesn't receive as much credit, Leonard Sapala and his team of sled dogs, along with lead dog Togo, who's pictured here, ran over 260 miles. They did the largest and most dangerous journey of any of these teams. Most teams average 25 to 45 miles, like Balto's team, while this team again did over 260 miles. Beyond Togo not really getting a lot of the credit, we also see this story neglecting to really kind of cover some of the people that were most affected by it. We do see the Norwegian immigrants that were leading the sled dogs getting really little to no credit for their incredible feats. This photo that we see here is featuring Leonard Sapala's team with Togo in front. This is a few years before that 1925 Sarum race. One of the reasons they were chosen was because they were actually practicing for a very, very long, over 500-mile race. Races that would basically eventually lead to the Iditarod race, largely inspired by the 1925 Sarum run. This is one of the reasons their team was chosen to do the most treacherous and longest section of it. But beyond the Norwegian immigrants that were leading these sled dog teams, the story also failed to mention that the majority of the people suffering from this diphtheria outbreak were a lot of indigenous Alaskans. So we do see this story really helping to save a lot of people, but not really highlighting the important aspects of it. Of course, there is a lot of information relating to this story. We don't have time to cover it all today, but I do encourage you to read up more on Togo, Leonard Sapala's team, and all of the sled dog teams that made this incredible 1925 Sarum race possible. You can check the chat and you will find some links to learn a little bit more about Togo and his team. And feel free to, of course, check our website for more information on this historic adventure. As we come towards the end of our walk, we can celebrate Balto, Togo, and all of the sled teams, all of the sled mushers, and everyone else involved in bringing this serum to Nome, Alaska, helping to save hundreds of lives. And as we end our walk, I would like to jump us back to the past, showing one of my favorite photos to ever take in a weekly walk. It's a photo from February 17th, 2021, where we were able to explore the park during a snowy blizzard and see Balto at probably his happiest state ever. As we make our way to the end of the walk today, I do want to launch one last poll as we take this view of probably my favorite, again, sled dog to see here, Balto. And as we stop, I want to launch a quick, simple poll: to snow or not to snow? Are you hopeful for a very snowy year, or maybe not so much? I know after last year, I want to get a lot of snow this year. I want to get some of these views and take us through the park on a lot of winter-filled walks. So I'm hoping for more snow, but maybe you feel differently. So as we come to the end of the walk here, I will have everybody vote in that, and we can launch a poll or rather share the results in just a moment. But as we wrap up today, I want to encourage you to visit the park even during the winter, even as it gets cold. Of course, stop in the park, visit a visitor center to warm up, grab a map, and maybe get some recommendations for great areas to visit. There's, of course, plenty of ways to enjoy the park, and many of those lawns will be opening up for sledding. And of course, other more pastoral meadows open when we get at least 6 inches of snow or more. So stop by the park and certainly explore all of the winter wonderland that is Central Park. As we come to the end of our walk today, I'll share the poll that we have right there, and I'll leave this room open for a little bit longer, just in case there are any questions we didn't have an opportunity to answer today. But thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you again soon on another weekly walk installment. Until next time, from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe, be well. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.